Mhm.
All right, Michael, you can't avoid it any farther. Limit posting weight limits on the bridge.
Yeah, back to the bridge. So my memo is pretty extensive here. I just wanted to use it as a sort of a mini presentation. We've talked about the background. I just want to make it clear that this new weight rating that's coming at us is not a result of any change to the bridge or deformation of the bridge or deterioration of the bridge. It really stems from both the relook at gusset plates that came out of the 2007 bridge collapse, but also refocus on specialized hauling vehicles, which have changed and evolved over time as the industry has tried to create more weight in shorter distances. So this started in 2019. ODOT was required by the FHWA, like other DOTs around the country, to look at all the bridges in their state. They started first with bridges that had not been rated before, and therefore we were down the list a bit because our last rating was in 2003. But they got to it. They hired David Evans, did the initial preliminary structural analysis, and gave us a heads up that a weight reduction was likely. We flipped that to our engineer to look at, and through their reanalysis, they were able to demonstrate that based on a typical truss instead of a unique truss that had been evaluated prior, that there was a lower number of substandard locations. But then we got the letter from ODOT in December that said, January, that said we're going to have to lower the rate weighting. Scroll down a little bit, please. So these are the new weight limits. We've looked at those. I just want to point out that a 3-axle Type 3 vehicle is really a smaller, compact delivery vehicle. Its rating, at least in Oregon, for a bridge is 50,000 pounds, which is the current limit. That's a small reduction in that vehicle class. The Type 3 S2 is the 5-axle typical tractor trailer, 80,000 pound weight limit. That's what you see a lot of in I believe the most, it's equivalent to a log truck in terms of length, in terms of weight limit and axle count. Although a lot of log trucks have jump scales too. 6-axle combo is of course the larger tractor trailer combination. So the reduction there is from 40 tons to 32 tons. Not a huge reduction, at least based on numerically, but has a significant impact on some businesses. The SU4 and the SU5 are the typical specialized hauling vehicles that you see on this bridge. So SU4 would be basically a dump truck or a concrete mixer, and then a SU5 is a larger 5-axle, but could also be a dump truck or a concrete mixer. SU6, SU7, those are really heavy-duty, large, multi-axle specialized hauling vehicles. We don't see those a lot. So here we have now the direction from ODOT that we have to reduce the weight limit. They're the reduced capacities. We started right away when we got the preliminary to reach out to some businesses to get an idea of what the impact might be, and we reached out to 4 or 5 businesses in different sectors. And then when the re-rating was done, the review was done, and we got the heads up from ODOT, we started a more concentrated effort to get the word out. And I was on a radio interview at KHR, and gosh, for the first time, it resulted in several phone calls, so that there is an audience to that show. And these were folks that had heard of comments I made or had listened to them themselves, and they were expressing their concern. And I'm no expert, I want to say that. I've reached out to several. These are people that really know their business, really know their vehicles, really know their market, know what their margins are, and they understand almost immediately what sort of impact that it'd have to their particular business. Fruit, again, I'm going to roll this up in a sort of a summary form and say that I am not an expert, but what I understand is from orchardists that are delivering from the farm to the plant, this is a Mad Adams fruit, there's, for many of them, there's this fairly small impact. They can drop a bin or two. It's an inconvenience, but not huge. There are some haulers, some farmers that are taking larger load of bins on flatbeds and such, and that could, for some, it could have an impact taking to the plant. The bigger impact, it appears, is from the finished product leaving the plant, and they need to run at the weight limit to be efficient. And so Mad Adams Fruit has several vehicles, and there's other haulers that are taking it to market that will have an impact. Logs and lumber is a fairly big one. Log trucks run at 80,000 pounds. To take a couple logs off is really inefficient, and they lose their competitiveness when they do so. And there's also chips and other wood products that will run most efficiently at 80,000 pounds. We do have some letters that describe the specific impacts to SDS lumber and several other wood industry businesses. Aggregate concrete, pretty big impact. Taking aggregate gravel mix or concrete to a job site, they will be impacted significantly. And then general are just the semi trucks that do go across the bridge. And sometimes when there's a road closure, there's a lot of them going across. So that's the basic summation of what I understand the impacts would be. When we started the original outreach in 2020, got an idea where some folks are coming from, and then I've developed a sort of an instant contact list of about 12 businesses that are the big ones around here, and one trade association, so that I've got direct contact with folks to let them know on a sort of event by event basis what's going on with this, and asking for additional feedback on impacts to their business. And it's an active group. So I've got some direct feedback there. We issued a press release. Genevieve put a press release together. That's out. And we did send it out to our postpaid accounts, and there's about 354, and those represent 90+% of the folks that haul product, commodity across the bridge. So we have a pretty active outreach effort underway, and calls, questions do come in still via email. So in terms of next steps, we have one immediate near-term next step, and that is within 30 days, we're required to put up new signs. They're fairly small, but they are very specific to a trucker, a driver, and they are the posting according to the vehicle classes. The signs will have to be larger because there are more vehicle classes covered here. And because they're on either SR14 right away or I-84 right away, we reached out to ODOT and WSDOT, and thanks to them, they've been very cooperative. We'll use the ODOT sign shop to get the signs manufactured, and their crews will then install them within their respective right-of-ways. I don't have a hard number. I'm guessing 10 to 15,000. The signage will not cost much, but we will have to pay ODOT for their staff time to install the signs. And because they're larger signs than exist, the wind load is greater, so the posts likely need to be stouter. And so there is a bit of work involved. But we're relying on them to help us to meet that 30-day deadline. But at 30 days, March 3rd, at that point, the bridge is weight rated at a lower weight limit officially, and it goes on ODOT's website. And so enforcement could occur should OSP, WSP, or the weighmaster choose to. And typically that's done with jump scales. So that's near term. We think we have a good path to get that done. Engineering wise, here's the important question, and there's a action item on the agenda tonight. Our engineer that's looked at the ODOT's engineer's work, of course that's HDR, and what they believe is that there are several, maybe numerous points that they believe have a good chance of currently meeting the standard that's applied to weight rating. And I'm going to skip ahead if I could, Genevieve, and look at that diagram. So this is in HDR's report, and this gives you an indication of the number of points on the bridge that are rated substandard. And if you look at most of them, they refer to gusset plates on trusses across the bridge. You see that repetitive comment with 2 locations. Each of those locations has a corollary or a mirror image on the other side of the truss. So every time when you see a box there, it says gusset plates T yield, there's 2 more on the other side. So those, generally speaking, HDR believes may not be an issue, but to demonstrate that to ODOT, we effectively have to run live load testing across each of those structural points. And live load testing means running a vehicle of known weight with strain gauge instruments set up that's driving across and demonstrating or proving up or not whether they meet the 1.0 standard. And I'm not an expert, but I'm trying to describe the fact that there is some subjectivity here. It's empirical, but it's subjective because when ODOT does their weight rating analysis, or their consultant does, they use a sort of a triage method that's, I believe, was pioneered by the state of Washington. And it doesn't actually measure each point. It looks at the configuration of the gusset plates, compares it to what the gusset plate should be, and it's not off by a lot, but it's off by enough for them to say, no, that's a little bit under the 1.0 standard. So HDR believes live load testing is a good chance of demonstrating that a lot of those gusset plate locations will not be an issue. The more important issues relate to the north ramp, the north approach ramp. There needs to be some additional, more detailed engineering analysis done of that, structural calculations, determination of the various weight loads, live load, dead load, et cetera. And then the same goes with the south approach ramp, the Oregon side, and the first truss. So that gives you a picture. Multiply each of those gusset plate locations times 2. They won't have to live load test all of them, but they will test enough to be able to demonstrate to ODOT, if possible, that they do not require any structural intervention. So if we can go back up to the schedule. So here's the question. Well, let me say it this way. This is a recommendation that we move ahead with that more detailed engineering analysis, live load testing and structural analysis of the approach ramps and various other limited number of structural points of concern. And through that work, the commission understands whether many of those points are not significant and do not need to be modified. And second, to what degree the points that we know need to be structurally supported or better reinforced, that we know where, how many, and how much to do the repair, what kind of repair and how much to do it. Because the question underlying all this, which I probably should have mentioned earlier or first, is there anything we can do to bring it back up to 80,000 pounds? And I think the businesses that have expressed interest would believe that it's important to their business to get it back up to 80,000 pounds. What I've told them is, we don't know yet what that's going to cost. So if it's a $400,000 or $500,000 fix, that's something that's much more likely to be considered and approved by the commission. If it's a $2 million fix, that's a lot less likely. And I believe that it's important for us to demonstrate that we will do everything we can to find out if it's possible and then feasible, I guess I should say, because it's possible, but does it make a price point that makes economic sense? Can we afford it? Is it worth it for the advantage? And the commission would have the information to be able to answer that question. This maps out a rough schedule that says if you approve the contract, they'll get going on the engineering analysis right away. It's going to take a while, and it's going to take a while to get the data back and put it together in a form that we can take it to ODOT. And it's important that their engineers say yes or no. But that happens in rough time frame, October. We have an idea of cost there. The commission can make that decision about financial feasibility. If it looks financially feasible, then the commission could approve moving forward into specific engineering plans and specs to make the upgrades. That'll take a while too. And then once we go through the bid process and such, I don't want to be over optimistic that if these things prove up, that I don't want to commit, I wouldn't want to commit to getting it done and getting it back up to 80,000 pounds before fall of 22. That would mean, of course, 2 fruit hauling seasons, and it would be a year and a half anyway of impact on logs and commodities. It's possible, if this broke right, especially that intervention or the determination from ODOT, it's possible that we could get this done in early summer of next year, which, if done at that time frame, would not impact that second fruit hauling season. So sorry for the long description here. That's the best pull down I can give you based on what I know and what the experts tell me. So the idea here is to get an idea from the commission about how you're feeling about this. And then the question to you is later, do you want to approve a contract with the engineer to move the analysis further? Questions?
Michael, I have a question and a comment. I was talking with a representative from the Port of Cascade Locks, and they had a significant bridge weight reduction several years ago, and they were able to procure funds from the federal government, which then transferred them through ODOT because they can't take federal funds and collect tolls as an emergency kind of a thing, and they were able to correct their bridge and get it back up to weight. I'm wondering if this is something that we can go to Washington, Oregon, and the federal and say this is, I wouldn't say it's an emergency, but this is an important economic factor in our region, and depending upon what the cost would be to correct the bridge back to an 80,000 pound load, either this could fast track a fund to help us correct it, or maybe this could help trigger a financial package that says it's too expensive to fix this bridge. Let's kick a new bridge into high gear.
And I wonder if the Washington legislature, I didn't even thought about that. I wonder if the Washington legislature might be interested in something like that, because Michael can answer this, but my guess is the majority of these 12 businesses are not Oregon-based businesses, nor are they paying taxes here, nor are the majority of their employees living here. So I wonder if Washington would be interested in that as well, because I would agree it's economically imperative that we have this, but I wonder if there's some other avenues there for funding.
Yeah, there's a meeting set up with Senator King tomorrow. He's been receiving some inputs from constituents, and so I believe I'm meeting with him or talking to him at 11:30 tomorrow. So the answer to your question is kind of yes and yes. I mean, we need to characterize the problem better to determine if it's possible, feasible financially. And the issue in Cascade Locks was when they went from 80,000 pounds to 8,000 pounds. Well, it's a catastrophic impact. This is important and very impactful to some businesses, but doesn't have that same wide-ranging impact as theirs. So I think we would need to explore the response, but it would not have the same emergency type categorization as theirs would. There's also an issue when federal funds are used for a bridge, like a toll bridge like this. You have to be very careful of triggering a certain act that would modify what we can do with funding. But I would say absolutely, this is something we need to keep in front of our legislators and our lobbyists and see what we can put together. But it's hard to do it without better understanding what we're dealing with.
Well, I think that's step one, is figure out what we're dealing with. And then if we can funnel funds through the dots so that it doesn't trigger any federal acts, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to pursue all avenues on this, and that includes whatever emergency funding. And granted, the rate reduction isn't as significant as it was in Cascade Locks. At the same time, they were able to generate money pretty quickly to deal with that situation. And I would think that there should be some level of a similar response here. That doesn't preclude us moving forward with an engineering analysis, because I think we need to take all steps. And looking at that particular action item that's coming up in a little bit, I don't think we can justify not pursuing that, given that that cost estimate. I think we have to do that as well. But I wouldn't necessarily think we need to wait a year and a half to deal with this, and just follow that as the only avenue. I think we need to make some noise about this one. I think we need to be in touch with the folks in Washington and in Oregon, our elected representatives in ODOT. This is a significant economic impact, and people need to step up, and these agencies need to step up and help deal with this.
Okay, loud and clear.
One thought, Michael, is if you meet with Senator Curtis tomorrow, he probably has letters and input from his constituents that we have not seen at the port. And all of that can be consolidated into our package of why this bridge replacement is imperative.
I want to point out the obvious irony is that asking for money for a new bridge at the same time we're asking for money to fix a current one. That's a sell. We got to figure out how to message that.
Well, hopefully we'll give them a sense of urgency.
I guess depending upon how much the repairs are estimated at, we can say, look, it's not worth fixing this old bridge. Now let's emergency fund to get a new one.
Yeah, it's a message that helps in that way. Absolutely. Okay, I think I heard you all loud and clear. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
Okay, executive report.
Yeah, I just want to highlight a few items. The first is the special meeting set up next week to look at the bridge replacement strategy. We're working hard on that. I'd like to forward a draft agenda to the commissioners so get some feedback, make sure that's covers the basis, but we'll focus mostly on articulating what our strategy is currently and what our next steps would be to make sure it aligns with what the commission wants to do. I wanted to just mention briefly, we're working very hard, Fred, Genevieve, and myself, along with Port of Cascade Locks, and the omnibus bill that was passed in the federal government end of last year had $900 billion for COVID relief. There was, I think, check me, Genevieve, $120 billion or so for transportation agencies. And included in that, thanks to IBTTA, which is one of our associations we belong to that Fred is very active in, it was successful in including within that legislation a specific reference to tolling agencies and specific conditions upon which they would be eligible for relief. That it did say, though, in the legislation may, it didn't say shall. So it's really up to the DOTS to decide how they want to distribute the money, and whether tolling agencies would be part of it. We've been engaged closely, not only with Cascade Locks. Mark Johnson is their lobbyist, but also Hal Heemstra has been very involved. We've been in direct contact with Travis Brower he's part of the executive team at ODOT, who's been very, very helpful. We put together the one pager that's in your packet. That's being modified to better respond to what ODOT wants to see, that in terms of articulation of the loss that we incurred, what our year-to-year toll revenue numbers were, and what our projections are for 21. So we just got another request from them, but I'm hopeful that they are supportive of this. No one should think that we're going to be made whole from the revenue loss. Fred estimates a $920 or so thousand total loss, because partly it's based on formula distribution, and partly it's based on the fact that ODOT has they've lost a whole lot of revenue as well through the gas tax. So if we were successful in 50 cents on the dollar or 40 cents on the dollar, I think would call it a big win. But ODOT has been very, very helpful. I want to compliment them on that. Couple other things. It's a little bit hard to decipher, but ex-Commissioner Brian Short has been asking for a letter of support from me for this nascent effort to utilize Barrett Park as a sort of a platform that combines technology innovation associated with the fruit industry with recreation. And he's garnered support, or there's a support group that's been put together that includes the school district and the community college and others. What he's asking for is a letter of support from the port that says at this early stage, yes, we generally support this. I told him that I wasn't comfortable until I run it by the commission meeting tonight. What's attached to my report is a brief description of it. And the idea would be to turn this into a letter that says the commission supports this effort. So on this one, I'm looking for specific feedback, yes, no, whether you're willing to authorize a letter like this with this description to be sent. And the sendee would be the Hood River Parks and Recreation District, which owns, of course, the land. Maybe a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Let me say this, Michael, I'm not sure. I support the idea. I'm not sure from a land use standpoint, I'm really not, whether or not Barrett Park can serve in this capacity. It's high value EFU, there's a lot of issues about that when they tried to develop ball fields on it and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure, but I support the concept of it. I definitely do, with the caveat, I'm not sure this is in compliance with the land use code, but I like the idea of it.
Okay.
I like it as well.
I think anytime we can support our youth in our community and get more programs available to them, I'm all for it.
Commissioner Strike, you okay with it? Okay. All right. Let's see. And then last item is under.
You don't want to know if I'm okay with it?
I want to know.
Geez, I knew I'd do this someday. Commissioner
Doesn't
Shevin.
matter. It's fine.
Ouch.
Yeah, of course I am. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Well, last item is this. Ann has put out an FBO request for qualifications. It's out on the street. The deadline is Friday. If there's more than one respondent, then we will need to put a selection committee together. Ann would like a commissioner to volunteer to be on that. And if we only get one or none, well, none is a different matter. If we get one, then it would be effectively be a sort of a negotiating team. Because I know there's been questions and some ideas about how we might formulate the scope of work and the services provided and the payment mechanism is such for the FBO. So the request is for a commissioner to volunteer for one of those two committees or groups. Or you can volunteer someone. You can volunteer another commissioner too.
That's called volunteer.
Michael, if we looked into possibly filling that position, that requirement within port staff, have we took the numbers of capital we spent with having an FBO ran by a third party, with the loss of revenue for the leases, the building they maintain and they use, taking all that capital and putting it towards an actual employee for the Port of Hood River? Have we run those numbers?
I'll say not specifically around the numbers, but the rough cut we have done. And I recall a few years ago, several years ago, there was someone that said, hey, I'm interested. I can be a half-time employee. And at that time, we kind of looked at what the pluses and minuses and costs would be. I think that's a fair suggestion, and we should do that in comparison to if we get a proposal, what the proposal or what the response might be and what makes the most sense.
Yeah, because when I ran the numbers just briefly last time in the packet, you had a breakdown of the hangars they're using and the lost revenue that they're actually acquiring. It may be a situation where it may pencil, Mike, for you to have another employee, and then we get the revenue sales for the petroleum, and we're going to more and more South service things. I think in business for yourself, I'm going to ran those numbers automatically to see if I could have somebody on staff do it, or to increase our employment by one person or two people. I think it's important to us to do that as a possibility. It may be more cost effective, and also you have more control of what goes on out there. We've lost that in the last few years, and we're having these problems from our constituents. And by having our own employee out there, we'll have much more control, I feel. We don't have to worry about dealing with legal contract or Jerry writing up with a third party being involved. It's under our umbrella. It's under our liability insurance we, the port, already provide. So I think personally, as one of the board members, I think we should run the numbers, run them accurately, and see if it does pencil. Even if we do get 2 or 3 applicants for the FBO opening, it may be an opportunity for us to right the ship again for the noise abatement we're having, and maybe get the constituents back on our side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, good suggestion. Since the deadline is just a couple days away, we'll see if we get a response at all. But that, I think we go into any negotiations with that comparison in hand, so we know what the alternatives are, and from a monetary and qualitative standpoint. So, point well made.
And are you still looking for a commissioner to sit on the committee, or to assess the proposals that we haven't received yet?
Well, optimally, yes. It's not critical. You're still going to see any comparisons. You're still going to see what comes back. And so this is more like offering an opportunity. It's not an imperative.
Okay. And we don't have any proposals at this time?
As I understand it, no. The deadline is Friday.
Right. Does any commissioner have an interest in reviewing or weighing in on what proposals we get for the airport?
I'm going to volunteer Hobie.
Thanks, Christy.
So noted.
That's a motion. I'll second
it.
Okay, approved and seconded.
That's fine. Yeah. No worries. I'll do it.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you, Hobie.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is how appreciative I am. I wish he was still on here for the work that John and the crew has done. They've been up at 2 a.m. for 2 days plowing. Yesterday, President's Day, national holiday, 2 a.m, and they did an enormous amount of work. It's hard to describe, especially for the airport, how long that takes and how difficult it is. So just if you see them, tell them you appreciate it. It's a lot of great work that they do. That's my report.
Okay, any questions? That will take us to Commissioner Committee reports, which I know that Christy and I attended. Anybody else attend the P3 via Zoom? Okay, then Christy, why don't you go first and each of us give our impressions, because it was 3 hours long. They had quite a lot of information.
Yes, it was a lot of information. It was enlightening to me to hear the different kinds of models. I think I had a preconceived notion of what a P3 partnership was supposed to look like, and hearing from these two different agencies, mainly who do these types of projects, was enlightening to me on the different paths that they can take. And also what it showed me was the speed at which they can take stuff, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, again, kind of thinking about the big picture of this weight reduction in our bridge load. And, you know, do we want to consider the possibility of pivoting and working with a company and or an agency that could maybe get us a bridge in 3 years as in constructed, or do we want to continue on the path line that we're on to get it built with as many federal and state dollars as possible? But the biggest takeaway that I had was I was always under the preconceived notion of we either go P3 route or we go federal route, and they're very different routes. And from one of the companies that gave their presentation, there's a way to kind of do them congruently, which I kind of like that aspect of, so we could get this kind of forward moving motion a little bit quicker, but still be pursuing these federal and state dollars to help keep the bridge costs down for the end user. So I thought it was very informational, and it kind of makes me think that we should explore the option a little bit more on behalf of our constituents. And I know that we're having a check-in on, is it Friday, Kevin?
No,
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
It's tomorrow. So so many meetings. So we're meeting tomorrow to kind of have a check-in with all of the group. And so I'll be very interested to hear in their feedback on what they kind of think should be our path moving forward. Did I get it, John?
Yeah, I think so. I had much the same impression because we had presentations from two P3s, and they were really night and day kind of companies. I did get clear finally on, at least I think I'm clear on what the P3 motivation is. For example, one of the companies represents the federal pension fund for the country of Canada. And that's where their money comes from. So when they're talking about funding our bridge, they talk about their funding stack, their tranche of funds. And first you got your TIFIA loans, or no, I guess first you got grants. If we can get any money for free, that's the best money. Then there's TIFIA, which comes at half of the 10-year treasury. Then there is whatever state monies or contributions to our thing. At the end of this tranche is what they call equity. And that's like 8% money, 10% money. And their point was that money might be 8 or 10% money, but it only adds a point to our financing loan because they're so good at getting all this cheaper money for us. And then they're also so good at putting together the contractors and the designers that we save a lot of money there, both in how we do it and not making mistakes. So I got convinced that there is value there to be had if we can get our hands around it. And that is versus what we listened to from Chuck tonight, where we get an owner's rep on board. And I mean, I don't think we can avoid an owner's rep at this point. We need professional input to our decision making. But whether we take that owner's rep all the way to designing and contracting a bridge on our own dime, or getting that professionalism from a P3, that's an open question in my mind. And I was pretty skeptical before. So good meeting.
John, Christie, in those meetings, did any of the P3 representatives speak about ROI?
You mean for
John?
them?
Yeah.
Well, I had to read between the lines to get it, but yeah, he said, I want 8% on my money. But that's not going to cost you 8 because I'm such a small piece of your package. I'm bringing a lot of expertise and I'm only adding a small bit to your financing cost. But he wants a good return on what he called equity. I think we'd end up saying, how much equity are we willing to give away?
The one thing that I really liked about, oh, sorry, go ahead, Hobie.
Oh, you say as far as equity, i.e. means ownership, right, John?
No, I asked that specific question. Go ahead, Kristen.
Oh, I said the one thing that I really liked about that particular company is that they don't believe in having ownership in a public transportation asset. And they really felt that the ownership need to be maintained by either the Port of Hood River or this bi-state bridge authority in the long run. And so that was one of the takeaways I had, was the concern of allowing another company to be able to allowing an outside company to have control over the tolls. And that's one business model that we heard, but the other business model that we heard, it's a team effort. And so if the port were to move forward and go into a P3 with a company like the second one that we heard from, and the name is escaping me and I apologize. I want to say it's Yardley, but that's not correct.
Plenary.
That's it. But we would have a say of everything from the percentage of the tolls could be raised, from who's doing the maintenance and all of the costs. But where they really come in handy is on the front side. They bring in all of this planning and expertise of contract negotiations. They have all of the contacts, they have all of the things. And so we would be saving a lot of time and expediting things. I mean, when they were going through some of their bridge projects and they're on a 3-year timeline and they were miles long, miles of bridge. One of them was a bridge tunnel system that they were going to completely redo. And, their timelines are 3 or 4 years to complete projects. And so that was pretty impressive to me. And like John said, they continue to go after the TIFIAs and the builds and all of these grants. And they actually commended us for our build grant award, saying how difficult it is for agencies who are not generally used to working, with build grants and whatever to receive one. So that's pretty impressive on the port's part. So bravo, Kevin.
Genevieve and Fred too, and Michael.
Yes, everyone.
Everyone. Yeah, they talked a lot about handback. I forget, I didn't mention that, that got my full attention. And they're talking a 50-year relationship, a 30-year relationship, somewhere in there, depending how the money works out, where they hand back the asset. I like that.
Oh, and the other thing, sorry, to add on to that is they like having the equity as a part of the bridge so that they're not actually fully paid back until the very end, to assure that they are responsible in turning over that, handing back the bridge to us in a capacity that we agree to. So they were not going to hand back a rusty bucket. They have to hand back something that, whatever entity would then take it over at that point, hopefully one of the docks would, it would be in a condition that would be viable for many, many years.
And I guess one of the other presenters was a guy that was Colorado DOT, and they had done a P3 build on US 36. And part of that was a concession agreement that took them a year and a half to negotiate. But that essentially gave all the terms and conditions under which the P3 would operate US 36. And at the end of the finance period, turn it back to the state of Colorado. And so I asked for that, and Kevin got it today. It's 140 pages long, so I won't be reading it overnight. But I think that would be a real agreement that got signed by a state with a P3 and would show what kind of what customization we could expect or ask for.
You two sound pretty impressed with that company. How do we hear more about this kind of thing without opening ourselves up to proposals?
Not really clear yet, but certainly we want to get there.
Well, I do know, and like John said, it was long, but I know that the presentation was recorded and it's on our YouTube page, and so I would recommend if a commissioner's driving into Portland or doing something, maybe key that up and just listen to those two presentations that were given, and it'll explain a lot.
That's a good point, because it's on YouTube. What's the name of the company again, Kevin?
Well, there was two. There was United Bridge Partners, and then Plenary was the other private firm.
And we have heard from United Bridge Partners before. Their model is to buy the bridge. They would like to buy the bridge from us, own it forever, and they're landlords. We're tenants, and they're rent. We rent. Whereas Plenary's model was that they don't want to participate as much in ownership. So you could go to the parts of the YouTube that are Plenary, and that's information we haven't had before. Whereas United Bridge Partners, we have heard from before.
One item that Lowell Clary mentioned is there's something called industry soundings. And so I think that's an area that could be explored a little bit as far as the next step. And then I think one other element that the project probably needs to take into consideration are the fact that it's a bi-state, that it's still the Port of Hood River that would be going into another state. Siegel has said that there are potentially some legislative changes that need to occur in Washington. So, those would obviously need to be explored and understood. But
that's an excellent point, Kevin, as far as where a decision is going to have to be made, probably is in that group that we're forming. I think that's an excellent point. And back to the earlier question about spending money on these timelines that belong with that group anyway. Mm-hmm. I think you're exactly right. The quicker that gets formed properly and legally, the better, because a lot of these things should be done there.
Well, and one of the issues is that if we're looking at a P3, currently the Port of Hood River has the authority to enter into a P3, and I think it would take a pretty long time for the bi-state group to be able to have that authority to enter into something like that. So that's a conversation that we need to have on what's going to be best for both states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could enter it, but we don't think we could unilaterally build something.
No, I can't conceive that this can be done without the North Shore on board.
Well, and one of the things that they did discuss is there's one thing to enter into the agreement, and maybe the port could do something like that. And then it would be another thing of who's going to be the ownership entity once everything is completed. And so that would buy us time to create the bi-state authority and to move forward with that. Basically, what they said is that there's a lot of options that we could explore if we just wanted to talk about it.
The discussion on Wednesday should be pretty interesting. We only have a half hour. So
Good luck with that.
well, and I think we'll end up having another meeting, 2 to 3 weeks later, just so Chuck Green can give his perspective as well. So it should be a really good meeting. I'm really looking forward to hearing what comes out of that.
Any more questions, or Chrissy, you got anything else to say? All right, action items. We got number A is to approve the amendment number 4 to contract with WSP USA for environmental services. Kevin?
I think you heard a pretty in-depth analysis. My recommendation would be to authorize amendment number 4 between the port and WSP.
I think you're right. If there's no discussion, or if anybody would like to bring discussion forward, absent that, can I get a motion?
I move we authorize amendment number 4 between the Port of Hood River and WSP USA for environmental services related to the bridge replacement project.
Chapman second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Fairweather, aye.
Chapman, aye.
Shepherd, aye.
Right, guy.
Everett, aye. Passes.
Thank you.
And B is the task order number 11 with HDR. Michael?
We've talked this over pretty well. I just did want to point out that this is probably a 3-phase effort. There will be amendments. Don't be surprised if there are. This first step is to get them going on the engineering analysis. Once they understand the specific protocols for the live load testing, that will likely require an amendment. And then we get to the point where there's a feasibility call made. If it's called to the good and we need to move forward, then that would require an amendment to do the plans and specs. So this is to get them going, and it will be a longer process than just this number and this scope.
And Michael, they're going to work all this out with ODOT, right? So that we know that what they're striving toward or working toward is going to be acceptable based on the information.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely, they have to, because ODOT has kill rights over any late rating.
And Michael, pursuant to this, we're also going to be exploring seeking, I wouldn't call it emergency funds, but making this a very important issue with both states and feds.
Absolutely, yes, I heard that very clear.
Then if there's, well, I'm good.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I'll approve the task order number 11 to the master service agreement with HDR Engineering for engineering services associated with the weight rating reduction of the bridge not to exceed $58,000 plus reasonable reimbursable expenses.
Strike second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Chapman, aye.
Strike out.
Shepherd, aye.
Fairweather, aye.
Everett, aye. Passes. Any commissioner have an issue they'd like to bring forward on commission call?
Commissioner Strike, I just like to have maybe Jack or Fred call me. I need a new laptop. I need a bigger laptop. So have that phone call, contact me. And this is kind of off the cuff comment, but Kevin, on all our renderings of the new bridge, it shows, I believe, the walking pedestrian path on the west side of the bridge. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I believe it went back to the type, size, and location study, and at the time, people felt that the view was better looking down that way to the west.
And Kevin, I just think about that earlier in our dialogue, is that from a safety standpoint, we have westerly winds, right? You're wearing a hat or an ice cream cone or a wrapper or something that's going to fly into traffic from west to east. So your hat flies off your head, it goes into oncoming traffic. If the pedestrian's on the east side, it goes into the river.
Mm-hmm.
Because the wind's predominantly on the west side. Just safety, just off the top of my head, I thought, I could see somebody jumping, or you're driving east or northbound or south or northbound, and a hat flies off in your windshield. You're going to hit the brakes or swerve or whatever. So just food for thought.
Yeah,
I know
that's a
the
great
view's
point.
better, but the safety may not be worth it.
I think that may be the first time I've heard that, Commissioner Strike. Out of all 155 comments, that might be a first and worth noting. So,
Yes,
Yeah,
I think
well,
you just
well,
added
also
3
too,
years to the development of this new bridge. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Uh, All right, well, that was fun. The executive session is up next. And so what, I recess regular session and you take us offline, Genevieve? Or do I open executive session first?
You recess, but you state what the executive session is going to be in regular session, and then you recess, then you go into the executive session.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, okay, so next we're going to executive session under ORS 192.6602E, real estate negotiation.